Recently, on September 8, 2025, the fragile quiet along the Donetsk-Luhansk border erupted into chaos. At precisely 5:15 p.m., as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Russian Federation troops unleashed what would become one of the most ferocious combined arms offensives of the entire conflict. This wasn't a mere skirmish. It was a meticulously orchestrated symphony of destruction, aimed at punching a hole through Ukrainian defenses and reclaiming momentum in a war that had dragged on far longer than Moscow anticipated. The assault kicked off with an overwhelming artillery prelude, a hallmark of Russian military doctrine emphasizing firepower over finesse. From concealed positions several kilometers behind the front, a battery of 240 BM-30 Smerch multiple launch rocket systems roared to life. These beasts, each capable of hurling 12 300mm rockets in a single salvo, fired in near-perfect synchronization. The rockets, tipping the scales at over 800 pounds apiece, carried a deadly mix of high-explosive fragmentation warheads and cluster munitions. Streaking through the twilight sky like fiery comets, their trails illuminated the landscape before slamming into Ukrainian forward positions. The impacts were apocalyptic. Dozens of explosions per second ripped through the earth, pulverizing reinforced bunkers, silencing hidden artillery batteries, and crippling radar arrays essential for Ukrainian early warning. The ground shook violently, a relentless earthquake that rattled teeth and sent shockwaves echoing for miles. Civilians in nearby villages huddled in basements as debris rained down, a grim reminder of the war's indiscriminate reach. This barrage wasn't random. It was surgically targeted to soften the defensive line, creating a corridor of devastation wide enough for armored units to exploit. But the Smerch systems were just the opening act. Hot on their heels came the Iskandram short-range ballistic missiles, around 40 of them launched from mobile platforms deeper in Russian-held territory. These hypersonic weapons, accelerating to Mach 7, arced upward on columns of flame before plummeting toward their objectives. Interception was a pipe dream. Ukraine's air defenses, though bolstered by Western systems, couldn't reliably counter such speed and precision. The missiles zeroed in on high-value targets, sprawling ammunition depots that erupted in massive fireballs, logistical hubs piled with fuel and supplies that turned into infernos, makeshift airfields where drones and helicopters idled, and fortified command bunkers buried under layers of concrete. One strike, in particular, hit a key supply node, sending plumes of black smoke, billowing hundreds of feet into the air and shattering windows and settlements as far as 10 kilometers away. The goal was clear: disrupt Ukraine's ability to respond, blind their eyes in the sky, and choke off reinforcements before the ground push even started. This was classic Russian deep battle theory in action. Overwhelm the enemy at every level, from the front line to the rear, to achieve operational collapse. As the artillery storm raged on, Russian engineers took center stage. Leading the charge were 20 UR-7 Meteorit mine-clearing vehicles, tracked behemoths designed for breaching fortified obstacles. Under the protective umbrella of ongoing shelling, they rumbled forward, launching explosive line charges, long hoses crammed with high explosives, across suspected minefields. Each detonation carved out safe passages up to 100 meters long and 6 meters wide, blasting away anti-tank mines and creating lanes for the main force. Trailing closely were the stars of the show: 55 T-90M main battle tanks, the cream of Russia's armored crop, each weighing 48 tons. These tanks boasted Contact 5 explosive, reactive armor to deflect incoming projectiles, and the Stora-1 active protection system to jam enemy guidance systems. Their 125mm smoothbore guns could spit out rounds at over 5,500 feet per second, capable of piercing most modern armor. Valued collectively at over $1.1 billion, this formation represented a staggering investment in steel and firepower, a bet that sheer mass could overwhelm any opposition. Flanking the tanks was a robust infantry contingent, 900 elite VDV paratroopers, Russia's airborne shock troops. Clad in modern Ratnik gear, they wielded AK-12 assault rifles, GP-234 grenade launchers slung under barrels, and 9 M133 Kornet anti-tank guided missiles for added punch. Transported in BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles and BTR-82A armored personnel carriers, their job was multifaceted: suppress Ukrainian foot soldiers, guard the tanks' vulnerable sides from close-quarters threats, and storm any surviving trenches. For the Kremlin, this operation was more than a tactical move. It was a statement. After months of grinding attrition, with losses mounting and domestic pressure building, a decisive breakthrough here could shift the narrative, boost morale, and perhaps force Kyiv back to the negotiating table on Moscow's terms. Commanders in Moscow watched via drone feeds and satellite links, confident that this hammer blow would shatter Ukrainian resolve in hours. Yet, on the other side of the line, Ukraine's defenders were far from passive victims. Under the steady hand of General Oleksandr Syrsky, commander of Ukraine's ground forces, A sophisticated defense in depth had been layered into the terrain. Drawing lessons from brutal fights in Bakhmut and Avdiivka, Syrskyi eschewed rigid static lines that invited annihilation. Instead, his strategy was elastic. Absorb the initial fury, lure the attackers into pre-planned kill zones, and then unleash hell with precision and coordination. Preparation had been exhaustive. Over weeks, engineers had sculpted the battlefield, dense forests, and rolling hills to channel enemy advances. Camouflaged in the underbrush were 40 M270 multiple launch rocket systems, MLRS, relics of Cold War design but lethal with modern upgrades. Beside them sat 48 M142 HIMARS units, mobile and elusive, loaded with GPS-guided GMLRS rockets, accurate to within meters. Targeting data was pre-fed into their systems, pinpointing likely Russian routes, rally points, and headquarters based on intelligence from drones, satellites, and infiltrated scouts. Overhead, a dozen F-16 Fighting Falcons, fresh from NATO training programs, circled in holding patterns. Equipped with AIM-120, AMRAAM air-to-air, missiles for dogfights and advanced targeting pods for ground support. These jets provided not just cover but real-time intel. Pilots scanned for threats, relaying coordinates to artillery crews below. On the ground, special operations teams from Ukraine's elite units hunkered in hidden foxholes along the flanks, armed with FGM-148 Javelin anti-tank missiles, which strike from above to exploit weak top armor, and FIM-92 Stinger manpads for air threats. They were ghosts waiting for the signal. Syrskyi's plan hinged on discipline. Let the Russians commit, expose their formations, then strike with overwhelming accuracy. It was a high-stakes poker game, betting on Western tech's edge over Russian quantity. Contrast this with Moscow's brute force approach, massed armor charging headlong versus a web of deception and lethality. The stage was set for a clash that would test both philosophies. At 5:42 p.m., the Russian vanguard hit its first snag. One UR-77 launched its charge over a field concealing a Ukrainian booby-trapped ammo cache. The chain reaction was cataclysmic, a subterranean blast that vaporized 10 vehicles outright, including engineers and escorts. Twisted metal flew skyward, and a crater the size of a small pond halted the column cold. Confusion rippled through Russian ranks. Was this a minefield gone wrong or a lucky hit? In his bunker, Syrskyi stayed cool, ordering units to hold. He gambled correctly that the enemy would see it as a win. Pressing on, this pause bought precious seconds. Then, the counterpunch landed. The F-16S dove from altitude, radars locking on a flight of 7K A-52 Alligator attack helicopters providing overwatch. A barrage of AMRAAMs streaked out, downing all 7 in a blaze of wreckage. Russian ground troops lost their aerial eyes instantly. Simultaneously, HIMARS batteries opened up. 96 GMLRS rockets soared, guided by GPS to the clustered T-90Ms in under 5 minutes. 22 tanks were gutted, some with spectacular jack-in-the-box turret pops as ammo cooked off. The air filled with acrid smoke and the screams of the wounded. Russian commanders, enraged, redirected smirch fire toward suspected launcher sites. One salvo hit a Ukrainian outpost, claiming 3 lives and injuring 6. But it was a Pyrrhic victory. Ukraine's M270s retaliated with 40 rockets, saturating Russian rear areas. Infantry platoons were shredded, command vehicles obliterated, comms lines severed. By 6:05 p.m., the assault had shed 30% of its punch. Ukrainian spec ops emerged, javelins claiming 7 more tanks from the flanks. VDV troops dismounted, firing cornets and scoring a hit on a Ukrainian APC. But momentum had flipped. The battlefield was now a maelstrom of precision strikes, turning Russian might into scrap. As the clock ticked past 6:05 p.m., the once formidable Russian advance had morphed into a desperate scramble. The T-90M tanks, now down to around 40 operational units, ground to a halt amid the debris of their fallen comrades. Black smoke billowed from mangled hulls, and the acrid stench of burning diesel and cordite hung heavy in the air. VDV paratroopers, trained for lightning strikes and rapid insertions, found themselves bogged down in a quagmire of their own making. Orders crackled over fragmented radio channels, urging a regroup. But the loss of command vehicles had sown chaos. Platoon leaders were isolated, unable to coordinate effectively. Contrast this disarray with the Ukrainian side's meticulous orchestration. Syrskyi's command post, a hardened underground facility reinforced with sandbags and electronic countermeasures, buzzed with focused activity. Real-time feeds from surviving drones and the F-16s. Targeting pods painted a clear picture. The enemy was bottled up in the kill zone. Flanks exposed, retreat routes under fire. Execute Phase 2, Syrskyi commanded calmly, his voice steady amid the storm. This was the beauty of defense in depth, turning the attackers' momentum against them, like a judo master using an opponent's weight to throw them. Smoothly transitioning from the initial ambush, Ukrainian forces ramped up the pressure. The remaining HIMARS and M270 batteries, having relocated to secondary positions to evade counter-battery fire, unleashed another coordinated salvo. This time, 60 GMLRS rockets targeted the Russian infantry's assembly areas, where VDV troops were attempting to form defensive lines. The precision-guided munitions homed in with eerie accuracy, detonating in clusters that shredded foxholes and scattered survivors. Over 150 paratroopers were caught in the blasts. Their elite status, no shield against the rain of submunition. From the forests, special operations teams pressed their advantage. Moving in small, agile squads, they flanked the stalled column, using the terrain's natural cover, ditches, tree lines, and abandoned farm structures, to close in undetected. Javelin missiles hissed from launchers, their infrared seekers locking onto the heat signatures of idling tank engines. 8 more T-9OMs met their end in quick succession, flames erupting from hatches as crews bailed out or perished inside. One particularly dramatic kill saw a missile plunge through a tank's turret, igniting the autoloader and sending the entire vehicle skyward in a fireball that lit the encroaching dusk. Russian responses grew frantic. Surviving Ka-52 wreckage had deprived them of close air support, but ground-based assets fought back. A battery of 2 S-19 MSTAs, self-propelled howitzers, positioned 15 kilometers back, lobbed 152 mm shells toward Ukrainian artillery signatures. Several rounds landed close, forcing one M270 crew to abandon their launcher amid shrapnel and dirt clods. Ukrainian casualties mounted, 5 killed in that exchange alone. But the trade-off favored Kyiv. For every Ukrainian loss, Russia hemorrhaged irreplaceable hardware and manpower. Imagine the scene from a VDV sergeant's perspective, pinned down behind a smoldering BMP-3, the whine of incoming rockets drowning out shouts for medics. This wasn't the glorious charge promised in briefings. It was survival mode, every second a gamble. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drone operators, safe in vans miles away, adjusted fire with clinical detachment, their screens displaying thermal blooms of destruction. By 6:20 p.m., the engagement escalated into full-spectrum dominance for Ukraine. The F-16s, fuel tanks still half full, looped back for ground attack runs, switching from air-to-air missiles to a GM-65 Maverick guided bombs. Precision weapons donated by Western allies. They targeted clustered support vehicles. Fuel trucks exploded in chain reactions, creating walls of flame that severed supply lines and trapped advancing reinforcements. One Maverick strike hit a mobile command center, killing a Russian colonel and his staff, further decapitating leadership. On the ground, Ukrainian mechanized infantry began to stir. From reserve positions, Bradley fighting vehicles, American-supplied workhorses with 25 mm chain guns and tow missiles, advanced cautiously, supporting the Spec Ops teams. They mowed down exposed VDV pockets with bursts of fire, while TOWs claimed 3 more tanks attempting to reverse out of the kill zone. The contrast was stark. Russia's massed assault, reliant on volume, crumbled under Ukraine's integrated approach, where every asset amplified the others. Transitions flowed naturally as the battle unfolded. Russian attempts to call in Su-25 Frogfoot ground attack jets were thwarted when F-16 radars detected them inbound. A quick volley of AMRAAMs splashed to aircraft before they could release ordnance, the rest peeling away in retreat. Asterisk. This aerial denial sealed the ground force's fate. No CAS meant no respite from the artillery pounding. What happens when an army's backbone breaks? For the Russians, it was about to get worse. Scattered VDV units, down to 600 effectives, resorted to guerrilla tactics, ambushing Ukrainian probes with Kornet missiles and RPG-7 South. They scored hits, destroying 2 Bradleys and wounding a dozen soldiers. But these were pinpricks against the tide. Ukrainian countersniper teams, equipped with Barrett M82 rifles, picked off exposed officers, exacerbating the command vacuum. Syrskyi, monitoring from afar, adapted seamlessly. "Shift to encirclement," he ordered, directing reserves to swing around the flanks. This maneuver, honed in NATO exercises, aimed to pocket the remnants, preventing escape or reinforcement. HIMARS adjusted fire to the Russian rear, hitting bridges and roads with unitary warheads that cratered escape routes. Plumes of dust and fire marked each impact, stranding dozens of vehicles. By 6:35 p.m., the kill zone lived up to its name. Russian tanks, now fewer than 25 operational, formed hasty defensive circles, Wagenburg style. But without infantry support, they were sitting ducks. Javelins and drone-dropped grenades whittled them down further. One T-9OM, its reactive armor spent, took a direct hit to the engine, immobilizing it as crew fled into the woods, only to be captured by patrolling Ukrainian scouts. The human cost mounted horrifically. Medevac attempts by Russian mate helicopters drew stinger fire, downing one chopper in a spiral of smoke. Survivors stumbled through minefields, triggering more blasts. Contrast, Ukrainian medics operating from mobile clinics, evacuated, wounded under drone cover, their efficiency a product of years of hard-learned lessons. Flowing into the psychological realm, morale cracked, radio intercepts captured pleas for withdrawal, but higher command, perhaps in denial, pushed for one last push. A desperate charge by 200 VDV troops, supported by remaining BNPs, aimed to break through to a Ukrainian artillery position. It failed spectacularly. Pre-sighted machine guns and claymore mines cut them down, leaving fields strewn with bodies. In warfare, technology meets tenacity. Here, Ukraine's blend outshone Russia's bluster. As dusk deepened, floodlights from Ukrainian positions illuminated the carnage, a beacon of defiance. At 6:45 p.m., the endgame began. M270 batteries, conserving ammo, switched to cluster rounds for maximum area denial, blanketing Russian retreat paths. Over 100 more casualties ensued, pushing total VDV losses past 400. Surviving tanks, fuel low and ammo depleted, surrendered en masse. Crews waving white flags from hatches. Syrski's forces closed the noose. Mechanized units linked up, encircling pockets of resistance. Surrender calls blared from loudspeakers, offering safe passage. Hundreds of Russians, elite no more, laid down arms, their billion-dollar arsenal reduced to scrap. The battlefield fell silent by 7 p.m., save for crackling fires and distant moans. What started as Russia's bold stroke ended in humiliation, a $1.1 billion lesson in hubris.